All righty. Well, this is the first inaugural edition of Liquored Up Live. This is Mungunzo with Flipping the Switch, and I'm here with the Mad Belmont, who's kind of my first guest, first one to kind of step in the lion's den here. And we're basically what this is, kind of explain to the chat, the people watching what is this is a chance for me to interview people that I find interesting and just kind of go over things with them, and a chance for them to interview me. So it's kind of a back and forth, irregular conversation. Nothing really scripted. I do have some bullet points I'd like to talk to folks about, but that's just going to be kind of used as a structure to kind of veer off into more relaxed conversations. So, um, basically, what we're going to go from here, I'm going to introduce my guest. I'm going to let him tell you guys a little bit about himself and where you can find him. And while he's doing that, I'll get the live links going as well. But I'm going to turn it over to you, Belmont. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself, your content, and why you got started in this space.
All right, what's going on, my fellow Belmonts? The Mad Belmont here, and I am a YouTuber slash writer. I basically cover Castlevania, Metroidvanias on my YouTube channel. I do a blog on over on Medium where I talk about that kind of stuff, but I also talk about ah,
Sounds good. I think I got disconnected there for a second, but it looks like the audio was still holding you out. So of course,
oh, okay,
yeah, of course,
okay. I was
Grandpa's
wondering.
first.
I was just like, where'd he go?
Yeah, yeah, of course, Grandpa's first stream is going to have fun stuff like that. But we'll also have all of your links in the description below when I get the video edited, all that stuff edited in post in. So, all righty. Well, that all being said, I think we are ready to rock and roll here. So, first thing I wanted to ask you and kind of go from there is been looking at some of your content and got a lot of really interesting stuff that's happened to you over the past couple of years. It looks like, first and foremost, it looks like you got started in this space. Actually, not so much as a video creator, but like me, you got started as a writer over on Medium after a bout of COVID. So tell me a little bit about that. What's it like in terms of getting started in writing when it's something you've never really jumped into before?
I never really gave writing a fair shake back in school. I just did whatever I had to do to, get whatever grades I needed to. I didn't really think about my writing like that until I got COVID, and then I started, just doing some small articles in Word at the time. And I was just like, you know what? This is fun. I might want to just make a blog and start talking, and I'll just get better as it goes on. And so and I needed an outlet for me to talk about movies. So I was just like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And then I started posting, got really consistent with it. Then, of course, life happened, and then inconsistencies started to form. But, you know, I still post whenever I can, though.
Consistency is something I struggle with too, man. First of all, writing is it's a lot of work actually. In order to do it well. Second of all, just a lot of stuff going on in life, and I think everybody gets that. Now, one of the things I noticed though is it started off with horror movies, in particular werewolf films. I noticed a pattern there. You got some pretty
Mhm.
good reviews up on your Medium in terms of some of those early werewolf movies, those pivotal werewolf movies. And I guess I've always kind of had a fascination with werewolf too. I wrote a review called Raging Loop, a video game on the Switch. It's a visual novel, and I talk a little bit about that. And in particular, you've reviewed two movies that take me all the way back to my childhood. Silver Bullet being one, and the other one being American Werewolf in London. Both absolute classics. Two of my dad's
Yes.
favorite movies that I got to watch kind of through osmosis, even though mom might not have approved of that, but I got to see them even at an early age. So what is it about American Werewolf in London in particular? That was your first review, so that one had to stand out to you in order for that to be your first review that you did. So what was it about American Werewolf in London that stood out in comparison to all the other horror movies that you have to love as well, given your content?
Yeah, so American Werewolf in London is what literally cemented my love for horror.
Hmm.
It scared me in a way that no other movie had done before or since. Like the way that John Landis, a primarily comedy director, does a fantastic job of just building atmosphere and making the werewolf seem as scary as it should be without showing you the thing all that much. You
Uh-huh.
don't see the thing that much in the movie. And even when you do, it's like, okay, there's that legendary shot at the top of the escalator, right? And it's looking down and you see the thing just walk out onto the screen. And I'm just like, oh my God. Okay. Like you don't
Right.
see it up close too much until like literally right at the end of the movie. So
Well,
just a
yeah,
combination of that stuff.
it's a classic thing in horror to show don't tell. And they do a perfect balance of that. So many people show you the monster or over show you the monster because they want you to see it or they want you to understand it. Well, it's horror, and part of horror is fear of the unknown. It's basically the idea that you don't necessarily have to understand this thing in order to survive it. You just have to survive and escape it. And the way they
Yeah.
did that movie, in particular, there's two scenes that are just burned into my consciousness. And the first one is, of course, that fucking transformation scene. It is
That's the one that's like universally known. Even people who haven't seen the movie have seen that
through
scene.
cultural osmosis, absolutely. Like that is the quintessential werewolf transformation. And there's other movies that have done it very well, but that's the one to this day to me. That's the one that I absolutely go back to whenever I think of a werewolf transformation. So that's one scene. The other scene that stands out to me in American Werewolf is that dream sequence, that screwed up dream sequence.
Oh, you mean with the werewolves that just break into David's house?
Yes, and kill everybody. And I kind of see that as a metaphor for the fact that he is himself transforming into that beast within at that point.
Yeah,
So the werewolves are invading his home, invading his consciousness in this case because it's dreams we're talking about.
yeah. Now, there actually I didn't notice until I started doing research,
Hmm.
but there is a lot of parallels with that dream sequence in a book called The Wolf Man, okay?
Hmm.
And there is a lot of dream sequences in that book that kind of line up to what uh not exactly, but they are fucked up apparently. I haven't read the book myself, but there are a lot of dream sequences in that book that kind of do line up with what you see in An American Werewolf in London. I think John Landis did a little bit of reading beforehand because that movie came out in 1981. I think they filmed it in 1980, 1979, something like that. That book, The Wolfman, came out in 1979. So
1979. Can you imagine how much special effects went into a movie being made at that time? There was nothing like it at the time that movie came out. Now, you mentioned a book called The Wolfman. Does that Wolfman book have any familiarity or relationship to the classic Wolfman, like the Universal Monster movies, or is that a separate
not from
thing?
what I see,
Okay,
no.
gotcha. The other one was, of course, Silver Bullet, which is a spin-off of a Stephen King story, Cycle of the Werewolf, I think. Or was Cycle of the Werewolf a different movie? Correct me.
Cycle of the Werewolf is the novella that
Okay,
Stephen King did, and
gotcha.
then that got spun in the Silver Bullet.
Yeah, Silver Bullet also was amazing. And the fact that she was the werewolf at the end, spoilers, but if you haven't seen this movie by now, what are you doing? Like,
Stephen King's the man anyway, so you should watch it. Okay.
Stephen
Like,
King's a great author. Yeah, Salem's Lot still one of my favorite vampire novels of all time in terms of vampires. You're talking about, yeah. There's the general horror of the vampire, but even more is like the horror of like small town secrets and how something
yeah,
like that could come into a small town, and because of how scattered and how secretive everybody is, it just takes over at just a massive pace. Like I found that to be extremely interesting and far more horrifying in some ways than the vampire itself.
yeah. And especially for me, because I live in a small town. Okay.
Mhm.
So when you factor that into it, it just makes it like 100 times more scary to me. Because I'm like, I know how these small towns work. Word spreads around really quick. People love to be secretive.
Mhm.
Okay. And so when I see that in a movie and I see it represented so well, like it is in that movie, I'm just like, oh my God. And the book. I'm just like, okay, yep, Steven, you're gonna have to stop with this shit, okay? But then again, I'm like, no, just keep making it because I want to devour all of it.
Yeah, there's nothing more horrifying to me than the dawning encroachment of the idea that the people surrounding you are not good people. And that's what Stephen King captures really, really well in that novel in particular. I mean, yeah, again, Curtis Barlow is an absolute monster. Straker and Barlow are scary, but scarier still is how that really only could have happened in a town like Salem's Lot, which is why they specifically chose that town.
Yeah, I agree.
So, yeah, so we got the horror writing, and I think you did. Yeah, I think you did really good in that. And some of the writing you talk about, you suffered from a little bit of self doubt, like kind of throughout your life,
Yeah.
and yet you made Medium partner in under a year. So how was that in terms of being a cure for your self doubt? That had to have helped some, right? it's a
Yeah,
that's a
it
pretty that's a hell of a thing to reach in 1 year in under a year. I congratulations on that.
yeah, that really helped me out
Hmm.
because I was just like, okay, I gotta do this because Uh, I am a caretaker primarily. That's how I make most of my incomes. I take care of
Okay.
my mom and my uncle here. So, uh, doing something doing something other than caretaking that I really love to do and that I am super passionate about, and it actually working out and me being successful at it, I'm like, okay, there's something here. I might as well just capitalize on this. And it bled over into YouTube because people kept telling me, you need to do YouTube. You need to do YouTube. You'd be great for YouTube. And I tried it before, but I deleted all the videos so you don't know. But I tried it before on and off, never really worked out either time. And it was because I did not go with my gut, which was, dude, you love Castlevania. You love Metroidvanias. There's hardly anybody talking about Castlevania on YouTube. You just need to talk about this. So, yeah, now it's actually worked out.
Yeah, it seems like it. The YouTube channel seems to be growing at a pretty good clip. Like I said, you made partner at Medium in under a year, so the writing is really taken off. I had kind of a similar story. Basically, what happened with me is I started with I've always liked writing, always loved writing, and started on a website called SNES Hub, playingwithsuperpower.com. And I would write Super Nintendo reviews because at the time I was having a Super Nintendo resurgence. I never really left the Super Nintendo era. Never really. We had a 64 in the house, but it was more my dad's for GoldenEye Perfect Dark, which I did enjoy. But in general, it was the Super Nintendo that pretty much captured and encapsulated my love of gaming at that time, and never really got into the move toward 3D that a lot of other places got. So when that website showed up, when Masamune started that website, I decided I was going to essentially jump in there and start writing reviews for the old games I used to love. Looking back, some of it's a little cringe and a little bit fanboy. You could tell I was in a fanboy stage of development in terms of that system with some of those reviews. I handed out 5 stars, like like a candy store guy would hand out freaking candy. But in general, part of it is also that those games just hold up. despite the fact that it's obvious fanboy reviews. So that was how I got my start. And then I kind of, when that ended up just getting busy with life, ended up going and helping to run another company, got an offer I couldn't refuse, and threw myself into that. And once that happened, kind of fell off writing until the Nintendo Switch rekindled that love of gaming. So it's basically my story. But yeah, it sounds like we kind of had a similar track in terms of, the off and on writing, because I've also off and on done writing projects and a couple of YouTube projects, and they did all right. But I'm the same way. Like, I will implode every project and ghost that I'm if I'm done with it, I'm done with it, man. I just implode it and I ghost it. It's just
Yeah.
and I part of me kind of regrets that now. Do you ever regret deleting some of that old content, or do you still have it somewhere, or did you do what I did and just completely nuke it?
I nuked all my
Yeah.
stuff, and there are some that I'm just like, man, I wish I hadn't have done that, but
So
it just happens.
so I don't regret it as much, because think about who you are as a person. Like, yeah, that content it's a nice time capsule as to who you were back then. But are you aware, like, for example, we regrow every cell in our body every 7 years. Every 7 years there is nothing left of the person you once were.
Hmm,
And so I kind of
I
see
didn't know that.
writing in kind of a similar vein of that. Like, now SNES Hub survives; it's still out there because I didn't own that domain, so I couldn't nuke that. But so that's kind of the only time capsule I can go back and look to. It's still really fun to do. So I am glad it exists, but there is something to be said about that renewal, that constant renewal that human beings go through. And so the flipping the switch is kind of the newest incarnation of that. Um, in terms of what I'm doing there. Now, speaking of which, and speaking of the Nintendo Switch, you just got another Nintendo Switch. And tell us a little bit about that journey on how you had a Switch, and tell what you're comfortable with in terms of what led to getting back into Nintendo Switch, if you'd like.
Okay, so as I said in a video that I did on YouTube, you can go look that up if you want to. I basically had a Switch. I bought it in August of 2017. I busted my ass for it because I saw Breath of the Wild. That was the that was the game of that year.
Mhm.
And then I think it was around E3 time, Nintendo announced Super Mario Odyssey. And I love 3D platformers. So, and I love 3D Mario. I love all Mario, honestly, but I love the 3D ones because I prefer 3D platformers over 2D ones, unless it's Castlevania. Then I do. Then I do prefer that. But so those two games coming out in the same year, yeah, I had to have that system. So I go out, I get it in August, got Breath of the Wild with it, played the holy hell out of that game. I think I put like 80 hours into that game on my first
Breath of
playthrough.
Breath of the Wild was a religious experience for a lot of people.
Yeah, it
I
was for
I
me.
can't I cannot describe just how that felt to get back to a dangerous and Hyrule in Perily, a Hyrule that had been overwhelmed by evil. It's the first time we had seen that since, hell, really, honest to God, it's the first time we saw that since, if you want to be charitable, Ocarina of Time's Adult Link, and if you want to be literal, it was A Link to the Past. Every
Yeah,
Zelda game since those games has put you in a world where evil had not yet achieved what it needed to yet. And it shows. It shows. You've got these ridiculous NPCs. You've got these dumb chores that you would have to do. I think it was in Twilight Princess where you literally had to herd goats before going on this huge fetch quest to get a fish for a cat so you could give something to an evil baby. Um, I was out. I'm sorry. I couldn't do it. And it sure didn't help me in terms of sticking with gaming. That and the fact that Mario 64, and I'm not saying Mario 64 is not a good game. Mario 64 is brilliant, and it literally created a brand new genre. So I get that. But see, I'm kind of the opposite of you, and I come at that from an opposite angle. And and part of it is that it was a Mario license. because I'm sitting there after Super Mario World and I'm like, man, I can't wait for the sequel to Super Mario World. Can't wait for that game. Can't wait for the follow up to that. And then it never came on the Super Nintendo. We got crying ass baby Yoshi's Island. And that got called Super Mario 2, which left me floored. I mean, good game, but not what I was looking for there. And then we go into the N64 and we get Mario 64. And I played it, and it's like, yeah, this is okay, but I can't wait for that 2D Mario game to come out on the N64. And I ended up having to wait 18 fucking years for that 2D Mario game on a console, which was New Super Mario Brothers Wii. So at that point, I was a little embittered toward 3D Mario and toward the direction gaming had taken in general. But the Nintendo Switch was kind of the return of that to me for the first time since the Wii. And it basically did for Zelda what New Super Mario Brothers Wii did for Mario for me. And that Zelda experience, yeah, it was absolutely a magical experience. And then on top of that, we did get Mario Odyssey, which is the first 3D Mario game that I can say I honestly liked. And I chalk some of that up to the fact that they finally kind of smoothed out that Z axis and it actually felt good to play. And you combine that with the fact that I was now getting 2D Mario games again. I think a lot of the bitterness came from the fact that I was being denied the one of the greatest selling games of all time that Nintendo refused to make for whatever goddamn reason, and in favor of this game that sold not even half of what 2D Mario sold. And so there was a bitterness that set in there, but in general, I think that faded with the Switch because they started servicing everybody. I mean, if you think about it, the Switch has something for everybody. Do you like 3D Mario? Here you go. Do you like Zelda? Well, here you go. Here's Tears of the Kingdom. Do you like the Fallen World, hard as nails, difficult Zelda? Here's Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Do you like Metroid? Here's 2D Metroid. Do you like 3D Metroid? Here's Metroid Prime Remastered. They've done a phenomenal job in just servicing just about every customer base, big and small, they have. And there's something to that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And going back to my Switch journey, I had that system and I played a bunch of different games like Breath of the Wild. I played the hell out of Super Mario Odyssey, Splatoon 2. My God, I was addicted to that game.
Yeah, Rush Dog recently got me playing Splatoon 3, and for a long time I was an absolute holdout because what I would say is, now I don't like live service trash. That was kind of my thing. I don't want to play it. I don't want nothing to do with it. And Rush is like, well, it's got a single player. I'm like, cool, I'll get it when it's $20. And then he told me about the Splatfest, and then I got introduced to the character Big Man, which Big Man is awesome, and I stand Big Man. I hope you will too when you finally get Splatoon 3. Are you on Team Big Man?
Let me see. Now, I haven't seen anything of Splatoon 3,
Okay.
so
Yeah, go
that,
if you can real quick, pull up deep cut, I think they're called. And there's three of them. There's Shiver, there's another one, and then there's Big Man. And clearly you will make the right choice when you get Splatoon 3 and you will be on Team Big Man. But I just want to see if I can get a commitment from you today on
okay, let me see. Splatoon 3.
that. Yeah. Because you got to play with me and Rush once we get that going.
Oh, trust me, I will.
Oh, it's fabulous. The Splatfests are so much fun. And Nintendo really did something innovative with the shooter in that. You want to talk about, one of my favorite aspects of Nintendo is their ability to do disruptive innovation and to look for that blue ocean. And so they basically asked the question, who's not playing competitive shooter games and why? And so I suck at Splatoon. I'm not good at it. But you know what I am good at? Painting everything in the fucking vicinity of my gun with paint. And so I can contribute even though I'm not that great of a player. And I love that.
Yeah, and that's what I like about Splatoon compared to other games. Compared to other shooters. And trust me, over the years, I played a lot of different shooters. I actually, believe it or not, used to compete in a FPS game. I used to compete in Call of Duty.
Oh shit.
So, uh, I know what it's like to be somewhat decent at FPS games. So, to play one where I don't have to turn it up to 11 every match, that was a nice little reprieve, and that's
Let
why I love Splatoon 2 so much.
let you relax a little bit. Which Call of Duty was your favorite?
Oh man, Modern Warfare 3.
I hear good things about all the OG Modern Warfare games. I heard terrific things about them. I hope they. Everybody talks about. They're excited, like, oh, well, I hope the new Call of Duty starts coming to Switch. Fuck that. I want Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 2. I want those classics. Big Red 1. Those are the games that I feel like I missed.
I hope the remasters of the first two Modern Warfare games come on over to Switch because those campaigns are amazing.
I saw graphically, it looks uncanny. It literally starts trailing into Uncanny Valley territory. Or is it just me, or do those games just look incredible?
They do. They do. And the thing is, they're remasters of games from the 2000s, but they look just as good as any other FPS game that comes out today.
I mean,
It's
better to me.
insane.
I mean, they look better to me. Like Price's face in that new Modern Warfare is insane, dude.
Yeah.
I can't believe how good that looks.
Now the new Modern Warfare games, I like them. I like them. I do like I like the campaigns more than the multiplayer, honestly. And I say that as someone who put like 1,000 hours into fucking Modern Warfare 2019.
Yeah, everybody's got those games they put a lot of hours into. For me, it's like Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind and Ultima 7. Oh, God. So many hours in those two games. But so you were playing Splatoon. Splatoon 2 is one of the favorite games for Switch. Mario Odyssey, Zelda. So having a good time.
Octopath Traveler was another one.
Octopath Traveler, which is an amazing RPG. And so you're playing these games, you're having a good time, and then what happened?
So we hit financial troubles at the time. It was early 2019, right before E3 of that year. I think like a month or two out before E3 of that year. And we were in desperate need of some groceries,
Okay.
right? So I was just like, okay, you know what? The Switch is the console I can get the most out of. I'll get rid of it, go get some groceries for us so that we can make it to the next month. And then I'll get it back eventually.
Right.
Well, that eventually turned into 4 fucking years because things kept coming up. Other games on other systems that came out that I just had to have, like uh, a bunch of Castlevania collections, 3 in particular.
Right.
The modern collections, which are amazing ways to play these games. By the way, I'm gonna do a video on that eventually because I got to talk about how good these collections are. But so they came out, a bunch of other games came out, and then I hit a wall where I was like, modern gaming just I just hated modern gaming on PlayStation and Xbox. I was just like, man, there was no, I felt there was no soul in anything. So I was just like, I'm going to go to the indies and the retro games, and that's it. And that's what I did for the past like 3 years now. For the past 3 years, I've just been straight up indies and retros. Like, I don't even look at modern games on PlayStation and Xbox anymore.
Well,
And so,
I can definitely understand your frustration there. Especially with some of the things that AAA gaming is doing, in particular the legacy franchises. When you see Castlevania, you want it to be fucking Castlevania. When you see Call of Duty, you want it to be Call of Duty. But instead, you always seem to get something else now. And Nintendo used to be the king of doing this in the GameCube day, and it used to frustrate me to no end. But it was this, I call it, people laugh, but I call it the ghastly Buffalo Bill reskinning of franchises. So basically they want the security of an established IP, but they want the freedom and creativity of a new IP. They want to have their cake and they want to eat it too. So what they're doing is they're doing whatever the fuck they want to do, and then they're stuffing those new creative ideas into an IP legacy franchise, and they don't give a shit what our expectations are. And so that is something that has always irritated me and frustrated me, not only with Nintendo, but with the industry at large. Now, when you pair this with all of the microtransactions and loot boxes and nickel and diming DLC and DRM, and you have to connect to the internet to play this game, nah, I'm out. I'm
Yeah.
out. You're not going to leverage me. You're not going to leverage me. That's not going to happen. That does nothing but irritate and frustrate me, and I'm out. And one of the reasons I like the Switch is a lot of people don't do that. But I've always been amused by the game industry if they want to have their cake and they want to eat it too. Sure, there's pros and cons for game companies to make a sequel. The pros are that the sequel already has that pre-installed sales base due to the fans of the original games. The con is that the sequel has to fit our expectations. And the games industry doesn't like you or me. That's kind of the dirty little secret. I don't feel like modern game developers have any respect for us, and they don't like to fit those existing expectations. What they see us as is a problem to be neutralized with a company they hire to perform viral marketing, for example. You saw that with Castlevania. What's the 3D Castlevania, which ended up being pretty good, but you could tell that they basically had inserted their own shit into the game, and then just we're going to overcome the fan expectations by doing viral marketer. So my question is, instead of
Yeah.
hiring these viral marketers and doing all this shit, wouldn't it just be easier to fit those expectations that we have in terms of that IP? And if you wanted to go make a new creative game, go make a new fucking game. Wouldn't that be easier?
Yeah.
Um,
Like, okay, uh, for instance, Mercury Steam, I hated them for the longest time because, okay, they came out with Lords of Shadow 1, loved it. I thought it was great. They came out with Mirror of Fate. I thought that was a good game too. And then Lords of Shadow 2 disappointed me to no fucking end. And that's what put the nail in the Castlevania franchise. So I've always associated them with that. And so I'm just like, fuck you, Mercury Steam. But then I see what they have done with Metroid here recently, and I'm actually playing their latest effort with that. And I'm just like, damn it. I can't believe I'm saying this, but yeah, you did a good job here. You did a great job here.
Dread's
And I hate to
legitimately
say
good.
that.
Dread is legit good, and I don't know how it turned out so good with Sakamoto still over the Metroid franchise. I'll say it. I'll fucking say it. I have no idea how that game is still as good. It came out as good as it is when I see that Yoshio Sakamoto is still the executive director. No idea how that game came out so good. No clue. And that's kind of the problem is when but what it did is it not only did it fit the fan expectations, Metroid Dread shattered them. Metroid Dread is hard. Metroid games are supposed to be hard. Metroid Dread allows for sequence breaking. Not only does it allow for sequence breaking, which other Metroid games like Super Metroid, you could sequence break, but it was really kind of playing the game's engine. No. Metroid Dread literally built sequence breaking and the opportunities for sequence breaking into their game. There's an entire boss that you can beat in one. You can one shot that boss. Actually, there's several bosses like that if you sequence broke and did something out of order. That was the reward for doing it. And to me, that was incredible. That's what I like to see out of video games. That right there, Belmont. Because the thing is, the longer I live, the more it seems like these people that are in video games now just want to do whatever they want and get us to pay for it. And I'm not somebody who's going to do that. No, I'm the goddamn customer. You do what I want, or you don't get my money. And if you don't get my money, you go under. So only the customer has a right to be selfish, and that's something that game developers need to finally learn and get through their thick fucking skulls. But end of rant. So back to your back to your story. So hard times show up. You trade your Switch in to get some of that to get some grocery money, which I'm not going to fault that decision. Eating comes before video games, especially if you have other consoles. That's probably sounds like that was your thinking. Is that about right?
Say that again. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Basically, I said I wouldn't fault that decision. I'd probably make the same decision in your shoes, especially if I have other game consoles. Because to me,
Yeah.
the kind of the calculus I'm weighing in my head is, eating and groceries are going to outweigh video games, especially when I have other systems.
Yeah, yeah. So I thought, well, since I have an Xbox and a PlayStation, I'm like, well, those two will, hold me over. And they have for the past 4 years, played a lot of RPGs over that time because I do love me some RPGs. I started my first JRPG, as I told you in the Discord, was Final Fantasy VI. That was my first proper
Holy
JRPG
hell. That's
because
awesome.
I saw my brother playing Final Fantasy VII, and I was engrossed with that. And I was just like, "What is that?" And
So
he was like, "Oh, this is Final Fantasy VII, but I can't let you borrow it because you don't have the system that it's on."
okay.
Because I had just a NES and Super Nintendo at the time,
Hmm.
and I didn't have a PlayStation. So he said, "Here, let me go and let me get you uh one that basically you can play." So we went to Movies to Go, which is a rental store at the
Okay.
time. Yes, I am old enough to fucking remember those.
Me too.
And we went in there. We picked up Final Fantasy 3 at the time. Did not know that that was 6, but until later. But we picked up Final Fantasy 3. We rented it, and I went home, and that that menu screen. Okay, like when I say that the Super Nintendo has some of the greatest like start menus of any fucking system out there, I mean that shit. They have some of the best start screens ever, and Final Fantasy VI is a perfect example of that. That creepy, ominous music with that lightning and the clouds in the background, and then it just crescendos, and you see the Final Fantasy 3 at the time logo come up. I'm just like, yeah, I'm about to go on an adventure, and I'm here for it.
Well, and I'll tell you, you played the better game. You played the better game of the two. Final Fantasy VI. I guess my question is like, in a way, it's almost like, man, you poor bastard. How did any RPG hold up to that standard if that was your first JRPG?
None have been able to dethrone it. Like I
Yeah,
played
well,
a bunch of different JRPGs since
the
then.
the only one I would even dare to suggest would be like a Chrono Trigger,
Yeah,
maybe Chrono Trigger. And again, that's a hell of a maybe, Belmont.
exactly. Because I played Chrono Trigger after 6, and I'm like, this is great, but it's still not this.
No, and again, Lavos is just not Kefka. That Kefka is such a compelling and terrifying villain. Keep in mind that Kefka starts off as a fucking clock watcher. He's like a clock watching employee. He's always looking for a way to kind of skirt doing it the right way. He's always trying to get it done fast so he can go home. And sometimes this takes absolutely horrific things like the poisoning of that kingdom, where he poisons the water and kills everybody because it's easier than just doing the invasion like he was fucking told to.
Yeah,
But you know, he's just a frivolous person who doesn't give a shit about human life. And watching his laziness and his impetuousness pair with his growing power as that game goes on is terrifying to behold. You just know that as this guy gets more and more powerful, this is really really bad for the world in a way that even Emperor Jestal wasn't. Like it's not good that this guy is growing this level of power and paired with that nihilistic and lazy world perspective.
yeah.
Like,
And I didn't appreciate that at first when I first played it because I played it the same year that I played the first Castlevania game, which was 1999. I was 4 years old at the time.
mhm.
So all I was, concerned about was, oh, cool things are happening on the screen. Sweet. And then as I got older and I started to, understand stories and games more, that's when I was like, holy shit, there's something here, you know? Because, yeah,
Well, Castlevania in
don't ask me
particular.
how I played a game like that at 4 years old. I had so much fun with it. I didn't care if I sucked at it.
Well, kids are smarter than a lot of people give them credit for. I've got a nephew who's 4 years old. He's already getting started playing Mario and some other games. I think I started around 4 or 5 in terms of playing, video games for the first time. My first system was a hand me down NES, and I absolutely adored that system.
Same. My brother handed me down his one of his NESs. He had two, so he handed me down one of them, gave me Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt and a bunch of other games.
Yeah, I had the
So,
same cart. It was. I can actually remember most of them. It was Mario Duck Hunt, Legend of Zelda, Zelda 2, Excite Bike,
yep.
Contra,
Mm.
Defender 2.
Oh,
Um, oh, there was one more. King's Knight, which is a Square Enix joint that is not a good game, but is I liked it at the time. And Super Pitfall, I think, was one of them, which is I liked Super Pitfall. I loved Super Pitfall. Now, looking back, that is a dog shit game. Like if I were to review it, it would not hold up at all. But I loved it at the time. It was this huge world, and you were exploring with Harry Pitfall, and um, not a good game. But Castlevania, I actually came to later. My first Castlevania game was actually Castlevania 3. I remember.
what a one to start with.
I know.
Oh my
It's
god.
kind of like you starting with Final Fantasy 6 in that franchise. But yeah, Castle. I remember Castlevania 3 when it came out, and all the excitement of the players. Then that game was a phenomenon. Heck, I remember discovering Castlevania 1 for the first time. Now my memory is fading on it, but oftentimes the NES was played in groups as a sort of house party setting. Do you remember doing this? Where 5 people would be around any one TV. You'd go to your friend's house, you'd play it, or they'd come to your house and see what games you had because there was a cartridge shortage. This is the early 90s, and there was a cartridge shortage at the time that stemmed from 1988. And so everybody had different games. Nobody had the same games outside of a few mega hits like maybe Zelda and games like Zelda, Metroid, Mario, which were mega hits at the time. A lot of people had those games. But outside of that, going to any one person's NES house was like going into King Tutankhamun's tomb and discovering all this new fucking treasure, right? And so
Yeah.
essentially that's what that was, and that's where I played Castlevania the first time. We'd have house party settings, and a lot of people don't remember that this is actually a lot of times how the NES was played in that way was kind of like, people would gather around different NESs in the neighborhood, see what kind of exciting games they had. And the Wii kind of reminded people of that, of how a home console is supposed to act inside the home. One of those games actually was Metroid. I didn't own Metroid at the time, but Metroid was at my friend Jeremy's house, and I was mesmerized by the tone, the visuals, the gameplay of the game. I was only watching, but it was like being in a trance. That part is clear to me. I had to rent that game immediately, so I went to Family Video, which was my rental place, and I remember renting that game along with Ghosts and Goblins, and I think Gradius, maybe 1942. It was just a string of modern day classics. All these games are great, but then he popped in Castlevania, getting back to the actual house party. And oh my God, Belmont. The thing I remember the most about the original Castlevania was how heavily textured that game world was.
Yeah.
And today, a lot of people would think that means like lots of art assets, but what I actually mean is the game world was very well realized within its gothic themes, the gothic thematics of the game. Now, this was a
Yeah.
time when
It's
you got to remember this is a time when video games were escaping their black backgrounds. If you go to the arcade, all the games had black backgrounds, and Mario was kind of the first game that gives you the blue sky with the scrolling background and clouds. And then so you had that, you had the moon overhead, you had the dark clouds over the sky, you had Belmont running around with a whip, and it was very distinct and different from other games at the time. And you had the evil castle, and you had the monster mash mashup. That's the thing. It's not just Dracula, but basically that was like Konami's mashup of every fucking horror movie monster one could think of, and it was a monster mash, like the song, and it was
yeah.
it was wonderful to behold. But at the
I
time,
call the Castlevania franchise, I call that franchise the closest thing to uh a video game perfectly encapsulating that Universal monster movie era, because that's exactly what it does.
it
It
is. Yeah, they're
puts
all
that
there.
era,
Yeah, the Frankenstein's there, the Hunchback, Igor's, the Medusa, the Mummy. It's all there, man. It's all there. But at the time, I was absorbed in so many other games. I didn't get to Castlevania proper until Castlevania 3. But Castlevania has always had that high reputation and that consistency of experience. Are you aware that actually the original emphasis for Symphony of the Night wasn't actually Metroid. It often gets told that it's a Metroidvania, but that's not
Yeah,
actually true. It-
it was a combination of like Zelda and a few other games, and so Iga, who was the director on that game, he he often says, "I wish people wouldn't call it Metroidvania. I wish they would call it Zeldatroid because Metroid was a factor, but it wasn't as big of a factor as people think that it actually is. No, it was Zelda and Metroid and some other stuff."
You just made my night, Belmont. You won the prize, man. You're the first other fucking human being I've ever talked to that knows that.
Hey man, look, when it comes to my favorite game of all time, which Symphony of the Night is, I fucking love that game. I did some research, okay?
You sure did,
And
man. That's I've never had someone else echo that back to me. But yeah, it was Legend of Zelda. Yep, it was Legend of Zelda. It wasn't Metroid. It was primarily Legend of Zelda. Um, there's another one. It's on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of, but um, Rygar. Sorry. Yeah, but yep,
that's
that's
one I haven't played.
yeah. Rygar is.
I
I
haven't
mean, Rygar's hard to recommend these days, but at the time, it was another one of those big games that you couldn't do on PC because it had that tactile arcade feel, and you couldn't do it in the arcades because it was just too damn big. And so that to me that's what a fucking console is supposed to encapsulate. It's the best of both worlds, like the Nintendo fan club newsletter said back in like the 1988. It's the largeness and expansive worlds of a PC game paired with the tactile arcade gameplay of the arcade. The best console games are always that combination of those two.
yeah.
So, um, playing these games, you end up selling the Switch, and then basically what ends up happening is you had a family member who was a little upset at this, right?
Yeah, my dad, he did not want me to do it. He kept telling me not to do it, but I said, "Dude, I have to because, my mom was stressing out about it at the time, so I was just like, "Well, I'm gonna take that stress off of her."
Sure.
She has enough on her fucking plate already. I'm just gonna take the stress off of her,
Right.
and he hated that. And so I promised him, I was just like, "Dude, okay, look, I will get it. We will unbox it together. You can watch me play it." I was like, "I will get it back eventually. I promise." And I as you can clearly tell, I did. Took a little bit, but I did.
You did good, man. Was your dad a gamer?
Actually, he didn't play games himself. He loved watching me play games,
He
though.
was he was
That was
yeah.
his thing.
Well, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of people that are like that. Like, there's a lot of like the Let's Play explosion. A lot of people were shocked that occurred. That explosion of Let's Players. I was never shocked by like what people literally will sit around and fucking watch video games. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
Oh,
people that
yeah.
love to do that.
It's a thing, man. And my mom, she games. She plays a lot of Tetris. That's her favorite game right there. She loves
That's
Tetris.
a good favorite game.
And
That's one of the greatest games of all time. I can't fault that.
no, I can't either. Because I'll be honest with you, ever since getting this thing, I've been playing the fuck out of that Game Boy Tetris game. Like, I'll boot up the Game Boy NSO app and just play the hell out of some Tetris.
Yeah, Tetris, ultimately a game about blocks, but like I've said in other places, there is something in our consciousness, whether it's Mario, whether it's Minecraft, whether it's Tetris, that wants to break bricks, man. There's
Yeah,
something in our consciousness. Yeah, we got this hand-me-down NES. I'm not sure where Dad got it. He might have got it from his buddy Hippie John, or he might have ended up getting it from somebody in the army. I forget where he actually got it. I'll have to ask him to get clarification on that. But that's how I learned how to play video games and I actually miss it. I'm hoping Mario Wonder has it. Doesn't look like it's going to. But I hope they have the two-player mode where you alternate between two players, because what would happen is I would be Luigi, Dad would pick Mario, and I would watch my dad's movements and I would try to mimic and emulate his movements through the level. And that's how I learned how to play video games. And I
Yep.
just
And
feel
I
like that type
actually,
of mode is sorely missing from modern platformers. I wish somebody would bring it back. Just the back and forth. I know people like to play on the same screen. I know that's fun, but there is something to that old style of multiplayer that is just lost.
you know what? I actually do have a game in mind for you on that. Okay.
Okay.
Crash Bandicoot 4. Crash Bandicoot 4 has a mode where you do that. Basically, you play,
No
two
shit.
players connect, and if someone dies as Crash, the other player gets to play as Coco and go through that level.
Well, I'll be goddamned. I will have to check that out. I've got a 4-year-old nephew I would love to do that with. So
Yep.
Crash 4.
Yep. That
Okay.
Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time is the name of the game. I don't know if it's on Switch, but I know it's on PS4, Xbox, PC, all them other systems. Actually, you know what? Damn it. Now I gotta look that up.
So while you're looking that up, so you were saving your money and working hard, and the day finally comes. You get your Switch, and that just happened recently. So, what was the first game you had to buy for your Nintendo Switch when that happened?
Well, the thing is, before that, in March, when I announced on YouTube and stuff like that
Uh huh.
that I was gonna do it, someone on Twitter uh contacted me, said, "Hey, I'm gonna send you a couple games." And so I said, "Okay, fine." And he sent me Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime Remastered.
I saw that. I saw that in the Discord. Yeah, the Cold Knights Discord.
So yeah, I had both of these games. These were the first two I was gonna get. Was these two because I had to play them. Uh, Especially Dread, because uh, at least for me anyway, because I never had a Game Boy Advance, so I didn't get to play Zero Mission or Fusion. So, well, I did play Zero Mission this year though, thanks to a little thing called emulation. But that's neither here nor there.
Right.
Uh, it had been years since a proper 2D Metroid had came out, and even longer since when it came out on a home console. It was since the Super Nintendo era. So I was like, I have to play this. And I've been playing the ever loving hell out of both Dread and Prime Remaster ever since I got this thing. Along with I've been playing Super Mario Brothers, because that was the first video game I ever played with Super Mario Brothers. And I've been playing the All Stars version of it through NSO, because I'm trying to go through all the Super Mario games in anticipation for Super Mario Wonder. That's one of my most hyped games of the
Me
year.
too. Me too, brother. You have no idea how hyped I am for Wander. The thing about 2D Mario is that
Well,
are
I'll be goddamn.
what happened?
Crash 4 is on Switch. I didn't think so,
Yeah,
but yeah.
yeah. Crash 4 is
So
on Switch, so I will definitely look into that for sure. In getting that. But the thing about 2D Mario is, are you familiar with the concept of ludology?
no.
So I consider myself a junior ludologist or an amateur ludologist. Ludologist is the study of video games and gameplay, its origins, the cultures that surround it, and where it comes from in terms of a creative aspirations. Now you can have ludology in all kinds of different crafts, but I think it's important to remember that there's nothing new under the sun. Everything comes from inspiration from somewhere. As much as a lot of game developers would love to be these gods of creativity and basically it just gets pulled out of their ass, that's not entirely the case in most cases. So where did Super Mario Brothers come from? It came from literary nonsense works like Alice in Wonderland, works like Gulliver's Travels, Jack and the Beanstalk, The Arabian Nights, Wizard of Oz. And you can see that, he eats the mushroom, he grows big. The tile floor of the castles and palaces in Mario 3, the beanstalk that goes up to the clouds, comes from literary nonsense. So I've always said that even though New Super Mario Brothers Wii was one of the reasons I wanted the system for the Nintendo Wii, and even though it was exciting to see Super Mario Brothers come back with full 4-player multiplayer after 18 years of neglect from Nintendo, that game was very lazy. I'm just going to say it. The gameplay was good. It was superb. But in terms of, aside from the 4-player multiplayer edition, it was grass world, desert world, water world, forest world, rock world, fire world. If you go back to the old Mario worlds, it was very creative. World 8 was like hell. It was like a dark hellscape in Mario. You had the Piranha Plant world. You had Giant World. Um, Inspired again by these literary nonsense masterpieces of literature. And
Yeah.
essentially what you see there is Nintendo just turning this into a factory product. New Super Mario Brothers series to me ends up being something you would see from Electronic Arts or from Ubisoft, or even though it didn't come out that often, it was just this. It was just this. It just felt very factory to me, right? Super Mario Brothers
Yeah.
Wonder is the first time since Super Mario World. We gets a pass. Don't get me wrong. We gets a pass. It was the first game in 18 fucking years, and it was the perfect way to reintroduce 2D Mario. Play it safe. But I warned at the time that they could only get away with that once, and if they tried to do it again, it would be a disaster. Fast forward to the Wii U, and they launched with New Super Mario Brothers U, and U became the first 2D Mario game to not propel a piece of Nintendo hardware to success. The first 2D Mario game that couldn't overcome the hardware hurdle and get people to justify that purchase. And I just shrugged. I was on the hub at the time. You can see those discussions. And I shrugged and I said, well, I told you so. So Super Mario Brothers Wonder to me is a return to those actual literary nonsense roots. You've got the talking flowers, you've got the batshit insanity of some of the stuff going on in those stages. You've got uh, you've got the name Super Mario Brothers Wonder. I hate the fucking box art. I will say that the box art looks as factory and as lazy as I've ever seen a fucking box art look. I hate the box art, but everything else about the game excites me to no end. Now, that
Yeah.
said,
Same here, man.
old man ramble done. What's your observations on on Super Mario Wonder? What are you anticipating about it?
I'm just anticipating how it's going to play. Me, when I review a game, I review it from a specifically gameplay standpoint. That's why I love Castlevania so much.
Right?
That series has some of the tightest, most responsive gameplay I have ever played out of any game series ever. So,
Yeah, it's beautiful. All these people. The main bitch I hear about Castlevania is the stairs. As AVGN kind of immortalized, and the Medusa heads. It's like, hey, use your fucking items, guys. Those items
that
exist for a
or
reason.
that or okay, let me do a little bit of advanced work here, okay?
Yeah.
Medusa heads run on a pattern. If
Hmm.
you walk, okay, you can actually manipulate the pattern to where they don't hit you. Okay, actually, there is a certain spot in level 3 that I just do not stop for anything. I just keep going, and there's like 3 or 4 Medusa heads. Each one of them just flies right under me because I just keep walking. Okay, and if you stop, you break the cycle, and then that's when they start to get annoying, is because the game's just like, oh well, you stopped, you broke the cycle, I can't control anything that's going on here. They're just gonna, you know, they're gonna come out of nowhere,
They're gonna screw your
basically.
shit up. Yeah. So basically, that's cool. So if you just knowing the proper pattern basically trivializes one of the toughest challenges in the game. Then.
Yeah, and every single enemy in every single Castlevania game runs on a pattern. If you learn those patterns, it they these games literally become jokes. They become so easy. Okay, like I I can go through the first 4 levels of the first Castlevania game and not die.
Well, I'll tell you what was so funny to me, and it's where my journey in Castlevania 3 ended as a wee lad. But it was this is so funny because we actually thought we got to the final stage of the game. We had no clue how fucking gargantuan that game was. Basically, we took the path that led to Alucard, right? And
Oh, okay.
Alucard's stage would have like the bloody eye teardrop enemies, and it would have the creepy music. And then you get to the end of
Oh,
the
dude.
stage, and there's a coffin, and then a vampire pops out of the coffin and starts throwing fireballs at you. And my dad was like, "Oh, we got the Dracula!" No, that wasn't Dracula. That wasn't even halfway through the fucking game.
No.
But we thought we our entire time, because keep in mind there was no internet back then, we thought we were at the last level of that game. We thought that game was over.
And I'll be honest, when I played it and when I got there, because
I thought it was Dracula.
it took me forever to actually beat that game. But when I got there, I was like, "Oh my god, I've done it! I've done it! Okay, I'm about to do this."
Well,
And then when I
I'm
finally,
glad it's not just me.
did it, I was yelling, I was screaming, I was running through the house. I thought I beat the game, and then I run back in there, and it's just Trevor walking up, shaking
What?
Alucard's hand. It has a text box in there, and I'm like, "What? You're telling me I didn't beat? Come on, man!"
Honestly, it should have been obvious. Like, what the fuck is Dracula doing hiding in a fucking sewer? But at the time, you're little, you don't know. And my dad didn't even know. My dad's like, well, that's Dracula. That's a vampire. Comes out of a coffin. That's Dracula. So that was kind of a fun fake out, in terms of that. And then there was the guy that was like climbed on the walls and shit in the clock tower, who just, we would never go that route because that guy would just clean our fucking clock every time. It's like, we're not gonna screw with that guy. Hell with that.
More pro tips here.
Yep.
Holy water makes that fight a joke.
Holy water. Okay.
It literally melts his health bar. You just spam that shit. You get like a 2 or 3 shot on that on the holy water. And you just spam that shit. Yeah, his health bar will melt.
Well, getting into the 16-bit era, then we get to Castlevania Bloodlines, which is, I had a Genesis and a Super Nintendo. We actually had dual console ownership for that generation later on. And I love the shit out of both of those games. But you and I were talking a little bit on Twitter, and we were talking a little bit, had a little bit of a discussion on Super Castlevania 4. And one of the things I had mentioned is, at least to me, when you have you in Castlevania 4, you have the whip that whips 8 directions, which is awesome. It's as if you are Simon Belmont, to quote the AVGN. But the problem with that is, to me, it kind of rendered some of the items either less useful or not useful at all, like the axe, for example. But you were kind of explaining your perspective, which is that that's not the case, because there's a lot of places where um, those items still are very useful and can impact gameplay, despite the fact that you can whip up diagonally. So tell me a little bit about that and kind of explain to the audience, your perspective on that. I think mine's pretty clear, but I want to give you a chance to also kind of go over that too. And because I think it was a good rebuttal, I just want them to hear it.
Yeah, so if you want to make health bars melt in that game, boss health bars melt, items are still very useful, especially that crucifix, because you get that, you get a 2 shot on it, you jump up, you throw 2 crucifixes. Okay, so you throw it, that's 2 hits with that right there, and then you can just spam the holy hell out of that whip, and before you know it, like with 1 crucifix cycle and a bunch of whip hits, almost half their health bars gone at that point.
And
So items are still
Chad,
very useful.
I can tell you, Chad, from experience, I did go and test this, and it works. That fucking Medusa boss, it's a piece of shit. Absolutely works wonders on that boss.
What can I say, man? I played these games. I played the classic games and Symphony of the Night so much that I just this is like second nature to me. So yeah.
Yeah, now, to talk a little bit about those Castlevania collections. Now, you heard it here first, folks. Belmont is going to be doing a video on how awesome these collections have been so far. And tell me, does it surprise you that such a quality product is coming out of Konami?
Yeah, honestly, it does. Because I'll be honest with you, they did break my heart, not just with Lords of Shadow 2, but the fact that they did what they did at the start of the fucking PS4 and Xbox One generation, and how they basically turned everybody and their mother against them, including me. I'll be honest with you, because it had already started with Lords of Shadow 2, so I was already bitter by the time that happened. So you give me more of a reason to hate you, fine, I'll hate you. And but then I started coming around. before those collections came out, and I was just like, you know what, they're gonna do something. I don't know what it is, but they're gonna do something to bring at least some people back. What happens? Requiem comes out first. That was Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night. Those are the versions that were on the Dracula X Chronicles on the PSP. They got a PS4 re-release.
Yeah,
Then the Anniversary
and
Collection comes out.
hate to interrupt you on that, but yeah, if the unfortunate person who works at Konami or Nintendo who has to listen to my podcast is listening to this, I'm gonna be arrogant for a second and just drunkenly assume that's happening, even though there's nobody fucking listening from those two companies. If you're listening to this, bring fucking Requiem to the Switch. Do it now. You're leaving
Yeah,
so much money on
seriously.
the table, you sons of bitches. Like,
Fucking thank you. I preached it so often. I'm like,
what are
because
y'all doing?
every time I mention that collection, I get spammed on Twitter. Hey, can you advocate? Like, I've gotten so many people asking me make a video ranting about that, and trust me, it's coming. It's coming. But then the next couple months, it's coming because they need to hear that because they are leaving literally millions of dollars on the fucking table.
We'll all buy it.
Millions of dollars they're leaving on the table.
We'll all buy it. Fuck, I might even honestly for Symphony of the Night, I might even break my physical games only rule for that. If you dumb fuckers can only put it out on digital, I'll buy it digital. Both those games, Rondo and I mean, those are two of
Uh,
the best games in the series. And you're doing yourselves a disservice and you're pissing in your customers' face by not having them on the largest platform of this generation.
I actually have some good news for you. There was a physical release of Requiem, limited run did it, and it's on Best Buy. You can get it on Best Buy right now.
For PS4,
Yep,
trouble is I don't have a PS.
100%.
I don't have a PS4 is the trouble, but it might be worth picking up just for that. Yeah, it's depressing. Konami, when they want to do something good, these Castlevania collections, you were starting with Anniversary, but tell us about that because when they want to do something right, when they want to do the right thing, Konami's fully capable of it. And I agree with you. I think Anniversary Collection absolutely proves that. And tell us a little bit about that. I'm sure you might have played it a little more than I have. I've dipped my toe into it, but everything I played of Castlevania Anniversary is absolutely top notch, Belmont.
Yeah, so Castlevania Anniversary Collection has 8 Castlevania games in it. You've got 1, 2, 3, Super CB4, Bloodlines, okay? And then you've got Kid Dracula. And then you've got a bunch of, they actually added an update to it where you've got Japanese versions of some of the games. So 1, 3, I think 4. I'm not sure on the Japanese front, but there are some Japanese versions that are on there. And they also have like a history of Castlevania digital book that's on there that you can go and you can look up like the timeline and some interviews with some of the Castlevania developers. There's a lot in that whole bundle that just makes it so worth picking up. Whether you go digital like I did at the time, because that was the only option I had, or physical, which I have done since then. I have a PS4 copy up here on my shelf, which looks lovely next to my Bloodstained copy, by the way. So yeah, it's
Fantastic.
$20.
Yeah,
$20 for like $20 for 8 games. And that's the digital price, by the way. If you get it physical, it's like 35, but
worth every penny.
still, yeah,
Yeah, no,
worth every bit of it.
they're masterfully done in my mind. Yeah, and same with the Contra collection. There's one more that I'm waiting on limited run for, and that is the arcade collection, which I primarily got actually for Life Force and Gradius. I think is what I got that for. And then Salamander, as the Japanese is known in Japanese, was one of the greatest shoot 'em ups on the NES. Like it's literally one of the best games on the NES period. And so yeah, Konami when Konami wants to, they can do something great. But then every once in a while they put out these lazy piece of shit efforts like this Metal Gear Solid release where they don't have not one fucking game entirely physical on the entire disc, on the entire card.
Yeah,
Nothing.
that was stupid.
Like what are you
And
doing,
so
guys?
I'm just like, And there you go, Konami. Like, this is why people hate you. Like, you're doing all these great things, all these Castlevania collections. You got the Contra one, you got the arcade one, then you've got the Suikoden remasters, which are coming out.
Yeah, I'll tell you,
Which look
Metal Gear
it.
Solid Collection has terrified me on what they're going to do to that game, though. Now that game's small enough where, granted, I think they can get it on the 8 GB disc, which is the only thing those cheap motherfuckers are ever going to pay for. If you can't fit it on 8 gigs, we're in trouble. But I'm terrified. I'm terrified because I want to play. Um, Cold Knights and other folks on the Discord, they talk so well about these two games. I want to play them. Rush Dog, I want to play these games so bad. I am terrified that they're going to fuck it up somehow. I hope not. I sure hope not. But yeah, the Castlevania Anniversary Collection, it does show us what they can do when they actually put their minds to it. But I think that's pretty much everything I had to talk about. One last thing, we'll kind of share what we're drinking here, what kind of powered this conversation. I am drinking a bottle of Blanton's, not a bottle, but a glass of Blanton's. I was going to say, I'd be much more entertaining if I drank the whole bottle, which is a fantastic bourbon. And what are you drinking? What have you been drinking tonight?
I I went the beer route. I don't have any liquor per se for myself, but I do have a couple beers, and I went with the Coors Light, which is my brew of choice whenever I'm not going on the craft side. If I'm going on the craft side, I have to go with Sam Adams. Like, I love Sam Adams. Now, I don't know if there's any Kentucky local breweries out there that people know of, let me know, because I'd love to try some of that.
Yeah, I'm starting to dip my toe a little bit into the craft beers. I know Sam Adams Oktoberfest is absolutely delicious fucking beer. And then we have
Yes.
we had broke my heart. They're closed now, but we had a brewery here called Rolling Meadows Brewery that made something called a Lincoln Lager that was some of the most fantastic beer you've ever had in terms of a lager. You would have loved that. But
Hmm.
they closed. They closed a couple years back. Haven't been able to get it since. But yeah, in terms of Coors, yeah, Coors. In terms of the domestic brews, you could do worse for sure. Silver Bullet, baby, good stuff. Um, Definitely. But other than that, I think that's pretty much everything we had here. Do you have anything you want to ask me before we get going?
Yeah, so like as far as games go, what do you think is your favorite game of all time?
Ooh,
What would you say is your favorite game of all time?
ooh. Damn. There's a few candidates, but in terms of hours sunk, in terms of personally now, I guess let me see if I can get some clarification. Do you mean the game I think is the best game or the game I personally enjoy the most?
I would say the game that you just enjoy the most, like
El-
I do with Symphony of the Night.
Elder
You know,
Scrolls 3,
that's
yeah, and Symphony is a fine choice. Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Easy.
you know what? I have that game. I have it on PC and Xbox, but I'm gonna play the PC version.
Good. Yeah.
I've never played that game, and I am just gonna I know that it'd be a lot better if I mod it, but I want to go back to 2003 and experience that game the way that people did back then.
Always, yeah, no, I would agree with you on that. Like if you see some of my stuff that I've done pictures, that's a heavily modded game. Graphics are very, very much up touched. Not only that, but I have mods that have literally transformed every little aspect of that game. So and made it in line with the vision of the concept art, basically. So it is a truly realized Morrowind, and I would recommend everybody do that, but not the first time. The first time you want to play that as it was originally envisioned. That way, and the reason for that, not only so you can appreciate what they were able to do back in all that time ago, but so you can also appreciate the level of care that the Morrowind has the greatest fan community, bar none, anywhere in the world. And they have spent literally hundreds of thousands of hours fully realizing Todd Howard's vision of Third Era Morrowind. And you can only
Yeah,
really appreciate the work that the community has done if you see how it all started.
yeah, man. Like I didn't realize how crazy the fan community was for Morrowind until, I started looking up Elder Scrolls stuff on YouTube, and I see all these different mods, right? Like all these trailers for all these different mods and stuff like that, and I'm like, wow, the fact that the fans have kept a 20-year-old game basically alive and well as they have, that's dedication, and I respect the hell out of that.
Through two sequels, by the way. Through two sequels that neither of which was able to steal the community away. Especially when you get into Tamriel Rebuilt and you see that they're even expanding into the mainland of Morrowind, and the content there actually exceeds what the original devs did by Todd Howard's own admission. Like Todd Howard still follows the project.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, basically there's the equivalent of 3 Vardenfells that have been added to the game's world. And it's done with absolute detail precision, utilizing every document, in-game document, and out-game source of concept that they have to build cities like Androthrin, Narcissus. Um, they're bringing it all to life. They're bringing it all to life that the team was not able to do because of time constraints. So, all
Wow.
righty. Well. Hey, I appreciate you kind of toughing through the technical difficulties. I think I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. But it's been a great talk, man. I appreciate it. Been a hell of a good inaugural guest, and we'll see who else we can get on here, and we'll have to do this again sometime at some point.
Yeah, for sure. If you ever want to do this again, just let me know. I'm down.
Oh, you betcha, man. It's been a great combo. I've loved it, and hope everybody else has enjoyed it as well. But we'll go ahead and get off here. We'll see what everybody else is into, and again, thanks to anybody who came out to listen to this. I appreciate it. It's been a real fun, real good inaugural talk, and I will if you could send me a message in Discord with all of your links, and I will put them in the video description. That way, people have that in case that muted out on them.
Okay. Yeah, I will be sure to do that. I gotta go do something real quick after we get done here. But after that, yeah, I'll make sure to put everything in there.
Sounds good. Yeah, and I'll just get that right into the video description that way. And if you haven't, guys, go subscribe to this guy for what fucking good it does and for what it's worth. I've got like 47 subs, but all 47 people sub to me should be subbing to Belmont. It's terrific stuff.
Thank you, man. And thank you for having me on.
Nope, you bet. Take care, buddy. Have a great rest of your weekend, and you have a good one.
All right. You too, man.